Hi, 7th grade. Welcome back. Today is Monday, and starting today, we're going to be looking at the conquest of the Aztec Empire by the Europeans. We're going to first have an overall look of European exploration of the New World, and then starting tomorrow, we're going to begin focusing on more specifically the Aztecs. Today, we're going to have a more general view of why the Europeans came to the New World, what was their goal, what were their goals, and how were they able to conquer the native people of the New World. With that said, I want you to keep in mind that the people of the New World were heavily impacted, were heavily negatively impacted by the conquest of their lands. So I want you to always keep that in mind, because that is important. We have to see history not from the perspective of the winners, but also the people that are conquered, because it does destroy, for the most part, destroy native culture, and I want you guys to think about that. Um, so we're gonna be doing the conquest for about a week, and then we talked about religion last week. So we're going, or the week before that. So you will be taking a quiz from me that's going to cover Aztec society and also the conquest, and that's going to be one quiz by itself. Today's video is going to be a little longer because I'm going to embed another video on here. So for that, it is longer as a result. So by the end of this lesson, you will know who colonized, and we need to go over that word, right? Who colonized? Colonize means take over, have control over. Who colonized the different parts of the New World? And if you don't remember, the New World is North and South America. Okay. Another thing you should have by the end of this lesson is, why did the Europeans colonize the New World? What was their goal? Why did they come here, and why did they take over? What did they get out of it? And the last question, and some of these questions are going to, you're going to get a preview, or you're going to begin to understand, but you're not going to fully understand by the end of this lesson. But you are going to begin to see what were some of the impacts on the native culture that results from colonization. And what I mean by that is, what happened to the people that were here, the so-called Indians, right? The way Europeans label them. What happened to their culture? What happened to their language? What happened to their religion? What happened to their traditions? What happened to their land? So we need to find out. Again, I want to make an emphasis that we need to understand history from their perspective, not from the perspective of Europeans necessarily. Okay. Um, so let me start going over. Let's go over this first. So this is a map of Europe. Okay, modern day Europe. We're going to be spending quite a bit of time looking at Spain. I need something different. Spain and Portugal. This is called the Iberian Peninsula. It's called the Iberian Peninsula. And you will see, oh no, you will see that the Iberian Peninsula, Spain and Portugal, on their own, they pretty much take control over all of Mexico and South America. Okay, so Spain it becomes one of the most important empires in history, pretty much. In the 1400s and 1500s, it was probably the wealthiest. 1500s, it was one of the wealthiest countries in the world, because it was able to send people into the New World and take over it. Okay, so Spain, if you look at this here, you will see that Spain takes over what is modern day Mexico and Central America, even parts of what becomes the United States. Obviously, they also take over Florida, and they take over all of this. Okay, this is the Spanish Empire, and as a result of this conquest, they become incredibly powerful. Just a bit of trivia, not trivia, but also part of history, is that you will see that the main language of these areas is Spanish, right? These areas, they speak Spanish as a primary language, because they were conquered by Spain. Spain brought over their language. Brazil's this guy right here. Brazil is this right here in green. Brazil's taken over by Portugal, by this country here. Okay, and that's why they speak Portuguese there. Okay, so the Spanish took over all of this. So starting tomorrow, we're gonna begin and focus on how the Spanish were able to conquer all of this. What were some of their strategies that they had, and what were some of the impact? What were the impacts of colonization on the people living there? The Aztec Empire is located here, right? And it is taken over by the Spanish. And starting this week, you'll find out, or we will find out, how the Spanish were able to defeat the mighty Aztec Empire, and what was the impact of this defeats on the Aztec people. Okay. You probably studied this in fifth grade. So the English were here. England was here, and the French were up here. Okay. Okay. So vocabulary to know before we watch this longer video. Colonize means to take over or have power, right? A colony is an area. A colony is an area, a piece of area of land that is controlled by the colonizer, the mother country. And the people that are colonized are controlled by that mother country. Okay? Indigenous is a person that lives in a certain area. The Native Americans were indigenous to the New World. A person from a certain part of the world, native. Right? That's what indigenous means. When you hear the word indigenous, it's talking about the people that were there originally. A conquistador. Conquistador is a Spanish word for conqueror. So the people that take over the New World on behalf of Spain are the conquistadors. The most important one you will have to know is Hernando Cortés. Cortés is the conquistador that takes over the Aztec Empire. Again, Cortés is the conquistador that takes over the Aztec Empire. And you will see that he is he's a pretty serious conquistador, but he also has a lot of help. Right? He has a lot of help and luck. And then we have Christianity. Christianity is a religion. It's a dominant religion in Europe at this time. And this religion believes that Jesus is the Son of God, right? Unlike Islam. And this this religion becomes one of the reasons why conquistadors want to conquer different areas, because they want to spread this religion. And we talked about Cortés already. Cortés is the conquistador who conquered the Inca Empire. Okay. I'm going to play this video, and then I will be stopping it once in a while. Okay?
Hi, I'm John Green, and this is Crash Course European History. So remember back in May of 1453 when the Ottomans smashed the thick walls of Constantinople, captured the city, and beheaded the Byzantine emperor? You probably don't remember May of 1453, come to think of it, but you remember learning about it. It was a bit of a footnote in our first episode, but you never know when the footnotes are going to be very important, and that one really did change the world, because with the Ottomans now also controlling much of Southeastern Europe, they established a navy, which they used in the Black, Adriatic, and other seas in the region. Ottoman domination meant that other European kingdoms and empires needed to find different paths to Afro-Eurasian trade routes, which ultimately helped spark the voyages of explorers.
As you watch this video, think of the reasons why they conquered and how we're able to do it.
In the Iberian Peninsula. So we've talked already in this series about the importance of shifting perspective when looking at history, and today we're going to ask you to shift perspective several times, but let's begin with the perspective of the Portuguese. In the 15th century, Portugal was poor, and it became more so as the Ottomans contested their access to overland trade, but luckily...
So what he's saying is, like, the Muslims were able to control trade between Asia and Europe, right? So these European countries that were used to trading with Asia are having a really hard time now, because they can go around Africa, which is harder, and they can't go through land because the Muslims control those trade routes.
For Portugal, the fourth son of their king was Prince Henry, who came to be called the Navigator because he funded and encouraged exploration, the study of navigation, and the development of new tools to aid in navigation. The Portuguese began to increase their travels along the Mediterranean southern shore, and by the mid-15th century, they were venturing southward along the Atlantic coast of Africa, where they expected to find vast wealth. In those
So if you look at the very top, this is Africa. Towards the top, that's Europe.
days, Africa was rich in food, salt, gold, and slaves. Mansa Musa, the Malian king who made a spectacular Hajj to Mecca in 1324 and 1325, was legendary and very inspiring to the Portuguese. He had an entourage of 60,000 people, including 12,000 slaves and huge quantities of gold. He seemed like
Just a little bit of trivia. Mansa Musa is said to be the richest person that ever lived in the history of ever.
the model of what the Portuguese hoped to become by traveling to Africa, that is, rich beyond imagining. In this pursuit of food,
So again, start thinking about what is it that Europeans want right now. They want money. Right here it says food and also slaves.
slaves, and gold, the Portuguese gradually made their way down the African coast, locating island clusters like the Canaries, and they kidnapped local people to sell into European slave markets and began dotting the coast with stone fortresses that doubled as trading stations. And there, many European men partnered with African women and started families. These women were often themselves traders and would be crucial for all European nations because they were the main force behind local markets
This is like foreshadowing of what the Spanish do in the New World with what they do with women.
and regional trade networks, and they provided essential connections to trade. Again, most of the Portuguese explorers were poor, and many of these female traders from Africa were wealthy and successful. From their perspective, Portuguese traders offered them new markets and access to new goods. I know we're all very accustomed to thinking of Europe as rich and Africa as poor, but that frame is both relatively new and way too essentializing. The truth, as always, resists simplicity. So in 1488, Bartholomew Dias rounded the Cape of Good Hope, or as it was called at the time, the Cape of Storms, and then the Portuguese ventured even further afield
The Cape of Good Hope is South Africa.
into the Indian Ocean. When we talk about explorers and exploring, we often conjure up images of intrepid groups wearing hats trekking through empty lands in search of hidden treasures, but that was certainly not the reality when, for instance, Vasco da Gama reached India in 1498 and found a highly developed Indian Ocean commerce with trading posts run by sophisticated Muslim merchants. Da Gama's instincts were to menace and fight them, and he did. And when the Portuguese reached Southeast Asia and China, they found a cornucopia of goods that Europeans would come to crave and about whose production they knew very little. Colorful washable cottons, finely crafted porcelain, also tea. Where would we be without tea? Well, I'd be fine, actually. I'd just drink coffee. What's that? Oh, Stan informs me that coffee also isn't from Europe. By the 17th century, the Portuguese were importing millions of pieces of porcelain into Europe.
Word import means to buy. When you are buying something and bringing it to Europe, that's importing.
Along with lots of delicious spices. And spices were not only important for flavoring, but also for food preservation, which I suppose is a kind of flavoring if you like your food to not taste moldy. All right, let's go to the thought bubble. The Portuguese Empire was, at first anyway, a trading empire, with small and agile ships known as caravels patrolling ports and collecting large fees. The wealth would be extracted from controlling shipping and trading routes, as the Ottomans were doing in the eastern Mediterranean. In contrast, the Spanish Empire, which began in 1492 with the exploratory voyages of Genoese ship captain Christopher Columbus, was based on colonies. That is, rather than controlling trade routes, the empire would control the land itself and the people who lived there.
This is really important. So the Spanish are colonizers. They want to set up homes in these places and control the people, and to some extent, and to more extent, exploit the people that are there.
extract wealth from them to enrich the empire. Columbus was a student of geography and maps, and he'd lobbied the Portuguese king to back his voyages, but when that didn't go to plan, he headed for Spain to petition its devoutly Catholic rulers, Queen Isabella of Castile and King Ferdinand of Aragon. These two monarchs were finishing up the drive to expel Muslims from Spain and force Spanish Jews to convert to Christianity, but religious persecution wasn't cheap. The motto of the Iberian Pathfinders, God, Gold, and Glory, perfectly described their ambitions, although perhaps not in that order.
This is really important because we're going to talk about it. It's not important because we're going to talk about it. It's important in the sense that this is the reason why Europeans, especially the Spanish, are exploring, and not necessarily in this order, right? Gold, they want to make money. They want to exploit. They want to take over. God, they want to spread their religion, Christianity. And glory, they want to become famous. Not famous, but like we are today in like TikTok or whatever, but famous in the sense like you are an explorer. You took over this entire area.
The islands along the African coasts and using the trade winds, Columbus's ships made it to the Caribbean islands, and his crews, which tellingly included both clergy and bankers, found signs of gold, but not great quantities of it. However, they did find people to enslave, and because no one knew the size or shape of the Americas, there was the perpetual hope that gold or other riches might lie just on the other side of this river or that mountain. Thanks, Thought Bubble. So I want to stop here to shift perspective. From the perspective of European explorers, these lands were new and potentially very lucrative, and the colonization model that Spain adopted and that Portugal began using in Brazil, and that the rest of Europe's empires would eventually use, was built on the idea that colonies existed for the benefit and enrichment of the colonizers, and secondarily to convert human souls to Christianity.
Very important. The purpose of the colony is to make the colonizers rich, wealthy, no matter what. And also a secondary thing is convert these people, these natives, to Catholicism.
Much of the wealth that was generated by these empires was done so by claiming human beings as a form of property, both through the slave trade and through forcing colonized people to work. And the systems that were built to support the colonies, from roads and bridges to churches, were built to extract wealth and convert people to Christianity. So
think about this for a second. I want you to always go back to how would it feel to be a person living in the New World and someone taking over you, someone making you a slave, or someone taking over your land, taking over your territory, forcing you to convert to a different religion. I want you to think about those people that were colonized, those people that were enslaved, because these were human beings that we need to know about.
The perspective of indigenous people living in colonized communities, colonization meant impoverishment in many forms. The loss of land for use, the loss of life itself at an unprecedented scale, the loss of long-held religious beliefs, and the loss of all sorts of community assets. But from the colonizers' perspective, it meant the possibility of getting rich, and so waves of ambitious sailors followed Columbus, searching both North and South America for extractable wealth. Okay, another breakthrough occurred between 1519 and 1522 when Ferdinand Magellan's Spanish ships circumnavigated the globe. Magellan had alienated members of the Portuguese court, and like Columbus, he found no backing for his proposed trip there. Also, like Columbus, he went to Spain to ask them to fund his voyage. If you were going to be somewhere between 1519 and 1522, on one of Magellan's ships was not necessarily the best place. The conditions and Magellan's no-nonsense discipline caused mutinies and other problems which Magellan handled harshly, executing or marooning mutineering captains in his fleet. But after finding the straits at the tip of South America, the fleet set sail across the Pacific, eventually eventually returning to Spain despite Magellan's death at the hands of local leaders in the Philippines in 1521. Of the 237 original voyagers and 5 ships, only 18 men and 1 ship returned to Spain in 1522.
So he was the first one to go around the globe on a boat.
But the voyage arranged and headed by Magellan was a revelation. It opened the world up to global transportation, exchange, settlement, and yes, also global slavery and warfare and pandemics and conquest. The Spanish could now stock their New World settlements with Chinese and Indian luxuries by crossing the Pacific, and fill their coffers from profits in New World goods by crossing the Atlantic. In 1519, Spanish invader Hernán Cortés came into contact with
This is really important.
indigenous people in present-day Mexico, landing on its Mayan eastern coast with several hundred soldiers and making his way inland, starting battles and forging alliances. He eventually reached the center of the Aztec.
He's going to be the most important conquistador that we're going to talk about. So he is able to build alliances with people that don't like the Aztecs, right? There's people that are enemies of the Aztecs, Native Americans that do not like the Aztecs. And Cortés is able to exploit these. He's able to exploit these differences of, or these conflicts. So he's able to get allies from Native Americans that help him and help him destroy the Aztec Empire. But there's something else that is much more dangerous and much more deadly for the Aztecs. Some of you might already know. If you do, you might email me. That decimates or kills more Aztecs than Cortés himself or the people that he's working with.
Empire at Tenochtitlan, where the Spaniards were astonished at the wealth of this civilization, and Cortés bowed before its king Montezuma II, who led a vast empire that stretched to present-day Honduras and Nicaragua. The capital had tens of thousands of inhabitants, perhaps hundreds of thousands. Markets overflowed with luscious produce and crafts, and the city had a sophistication that, like the wealth itself, was foreign to Europeans.
So Montezuma II is the emperor of the Aztecs, who Cortés is going to talk to.
Even if the Aztec practice of human sacrifice was also foreign. A similar awe filled Francisco Pizarro when he saw the textiles and silver and gold objects crafted by the Incas, who'd also created thousands of miles of roads and efficient institutions to hold their vast empire together along the west coast of present-day South America. Both Pizarro and Cortés relied on help from rival indigenous communities to help them take control from the Incas and Aztecs. The conquerors also married the princesses and other noble women they had raped as a ritual of domination, and marriage gave them access to insider information, local networks, and the wealth that such women possessed, including wealth in enslaved peoples. So Iberians were incentivized to set sail by their poverty and by their Catholic faith, but they were disadvantaged by a comparative lack of manufacturing skills when it came to trade. What they did
When he says Iberians, that means Spain and Portugal.
Have, at least at first, was sailing prowess and weaponry on their side. Iberian caravels were nimble and they could be loaded with cannons. The Portuguese borrowed the use of triangular sails from the Arabs, often combining them with square-rigged ones to make better use of the winds. And Iberians also employed a range of navigational instruments, technology generally taken from other cultures, in determining latitude, while their onboard cartographers created portolan charts, literally charts related to ports that indicated coastal dangers, good harbors, and other details important to seafaring. Astrolabes, quadrants, compasses, and other instruments gave good indications of location and direction, but you know what you really needed? A clock. That's right, there's a clock in the center of the world. This $6 clock is an astonishing piece of technology. Stan would like me to point out that it was actually $8. Thank you for your support at patreon.com/crashcourse. It wasn't until the 18th century development of the chronometer that sailors could chart longitudinal location, and even now, GPS relies on extremely precise knowledge of the time. In short, when it comes to history and also everything else, it's not just a question of where you are, it's a question of when you are. Early European explorers almost always had to enlist local people to advise them in how to navigate the seas, especially in the Indian Ocean, and local non-European traders served as intermediaries for the artisans in porcelain, cotton, and other crafted products. Through them, Europeans slowly learned about trading procedures, sources of goods, and the means of judging quality, as initially
One thing that I want you to remember is a lot of what Europe is using now is technology that they've borrowed from other people. A lot of their sailing technology comes from the Arabs, and you'll see that gunpowder comes from China. The people of the New World do not have gunpowder, and this is one of the weapons that the Europeans are able to use to destroy the Native Americans.
the Iberians were not well acquainted with the goods available in these trading ports. And there were other go-betweens, like translators connecting Europeans and local people. One example is Malinche, or Doña Maria, as the Spanish called her. She facilitated the passage of Hernán Cortés and his small army across Mexico and into the capital of the Aztec Empire, gathering allies for him and warning him of impending danger along the way. And because of the hostilities among different groups that predated the arrival of Europeans, go-betweens who knew about these animosities could use them to help mobilize support for the Europeans so that one local group would lead the charge against another. That happened in the conquest of both Central America in the 1520s and the Inca Empire in the 1530s.
So again, the Europeans are really good at having the Native Americans fight off each other, or the Europeans are good at bringing in Native Americans to defeat the Aztecs or the Inca. In Mexico, Cortez was able to find people that disliked the Aztecs and have them help him defeat the Aztecs.
In Europe, meanwhile, all of this voyaging and conquering produced a lot of tension between the Iberian kingdoms. What land would be Spain's? What land would be Portugal's? A treaty sponsored by the Church eventually settled disputes between Spain and Portugal over territory that each was claiming. I mean, who do you call about property disputes if not the Pope? The Treaty of Tordesillas, which was signed in 1494, provided a permanent line of demarcation 370 leagues west of the Cape Verde Islands off the Atlantic coast of Africa, and in 1529, another treaty set bounds for each country in the Indian.
So these Europeans are breaking up the New World as if it's a pizza, right? And without regard to the natives. Do you think they asked the natives, what do you think? Do you want to be colonized? Do you want to be part of this? Absolutely not. The Europeans came, conquered, and then divided and exploited.
Ocean and Pacific regions. But treaties, of course, did not prevent the death at the hands of European weaponry and the diseases that contact entailed. In the Western Hemisphere, the local inhabitants' lack of resistance to European diseases was probably a more important factor in conquest than weaponry was. In the long run, violence, enslavement, and European diseases like smallpox and measles led to the death of perhaps as much as 90% of the indigenous American population.
So this is what I was talking about before. The Europeans came, conquered, they killed people in war, but it was these diseases that the Europeans brought that the Native Americans had never been exposed to. So when they're exposed to it, their bodies cannot react, their bodies don't have immunity, and therefore, and not therefore, but and then they died. It's very similar to what's happening with COVID today. Most people around the world don't have a resistance to COVID because it's a new strain. And when they get really sick, right? With the Native Americans, with the Aztecs, the Inca, when Europeans came, Europeans brought these diseases that the Native Americans had never experienced before, and their bodies were not able to handle it. So according to this video, about 90% of the people died. And someone's going to ask me, well, did the Europeans die because they had it? Yes, some of them did, but their bodies, most of the Europeans had immunity to it. Their bodies had been exposed to these diseases, so their bodies were able to fight it off.
Diseases spread and killed so quickly that entire communities ceased to exist almost at once, and with them their traditions, stories, and values. Meanwhile, colonization proved extremely lucrative for Spain and Portugal, which within a century went from being poor kingdoms to astonishingly rich ones, especially after 1545, when the Spanish uncovered a huge deposit of silver in Potosi in present-day Bolivia and began conscripting indigenous people to do the most dangerous work work in the mines. Migration to both regions swelled, and ships now crisscrossed both the Atlantic and the Pacific, and this huge influx of wealth to Spain and Portugal would reshape power in Europe and also life everywhere else, as everything from microbes to ideas suddenly had a truly global reach. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time. This is a kind of flavoring if you like your food to...
So let's go back to these questions. Who colonized what parts of the world? Why the Europeans colonized? And what were some of the impacts that the native culture impact on the native culture? One of the ones I want you to remember is the pretty much the destruction of society for native culture. Before the Europeans came to the New World, they had well-established societies. They had kingdoms, and as a result of European colonizations, those were destroyed. Right, deaths beyond imagination, 90%, and in some places, the destruction of religious ideas. Right, Aztec and Inca religion is replaced by Christianity. Enslavements of people, death of people, native people. So, and even language, right? If you go to these places around or in Mexico, Central America, and in the western part of South America, it's Spanish, right? And those languages that are native are of people that are incredibly poor today. Okay, you will have these questions in classroom. There are going to be 3 questions, and yeah, let me know if you guys have any questions. I'll see you guys later.